Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations. Today's episode is with Seth Waltz. Seth is a runner living in Boston with a running squad about as big as his goals. Seth, or Common Athlete, not only knows everyone in the Boston running community, but runs with just about all of them on a weekly basis. We talk training, his passion for helping others, and how he went from nearly a 4-hour first marathon to his goal of lining up in the elite corral at the Boston Marathon, and why that's important to him. Enjoy! I am here with Seth Waltz, who is a runner and self-proclaimed common athlete here in Boston, Massachusetts. Seth, thanks for coming on the For the Long Run podcast.
Yeah, I love it. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right into it. Common athlete. You're a pretty fast dude. Let's hear. Where did Common Athlete come from?
Common Athlete came from. I actually, when I first started running, I had a blog, and the first race that I ever trained for and ran or raced was the Boston Marathon in 2014. And, I was raising money for that. It was a charity thing. And I found that a lot of people back home where I'm from in upstate New York were just really interested in following along and wondering how it went and how training was going. So I decided to just create a blog so that they could follow along with me. And I thought it might help create a little more buzz for maybe raising some money. And I called the blog The Common Athlete. And so that just sort of stuck with me since. I don't have to blog anymore. I think it got erased somewhere in the interwebs. But it's sort of stuck. I kind of liked it.
Cool. And you're from upstate New York. You've got the 516 tattoo?
Oh, 518, brother.
518.
518. Yeah, it's everywhere. No tattoo, but I love the 518.
Cool. And what was the charity team you were fundraising for back in 2014?
That's kind of interesting. I basically decided I didn't have one initially, and it was one of the last days of January, and I won't go into what sort of prompted this, maybe a year previous, but I said, I'm running the Boston Marathon this year. I don't have a charity or a bib. But it's time for me to do it. So I just started training. I downloaded some crappy website or a training plan from the website, and I just started training, and I was just hopeful that I would be able to find a way to get a bib, not knowing how it worked. And just through some contacts, through clients and people I've worked with, and the firm that I associate with has a charitable foundation. We were finally able to, through John Hancock and some other people, piece together a bib. So we ended up raising money for our charitable foundation, and we got a bib finally. I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the race. So it worked out. It worked out well. I was pretty happy.
Nice. But you were pretty committed to running that marathon?
I just decided I was running regardless. I would have probably abandoned it, which you probably can't do anymore, but I was willing to.
And so this was 2014. How much earlier had you gotten into running?
I hadn't really. I mean, I had so just as a quick reference, I had played soccer through high school and through college. I went to UNH, and then I only played 3 years there. I had just a series of back injuries that ended up causing an early retirement, and then I never really got that fixed. And so really for the next decade out of college, I really did nothing, because every time I tried to do something, I'd pick up basketball, go to the gym, do whatever, I would end up flaring up some issue with my back, and then being unable to even walk around the house, feeling like an old man. And so then I would do nothing. And then, the winter before, so I guess that's fall, winter 2013, finally everyone was like, you should try yoga. You should try yoga. It'll be great for you. And me just sort of remembering what I used to be in this athlete and like a typical male, like, well, whatever, yoga. What's that going to be good for? That's not going to be any fun. Like an idiot. But I drove by a yoga studio, every day to and from work. And I was like, you know what? Shame on me. I can't do anything right now if I don't just stop in and give it a go. And I did that. And it kicked my ass, and it was pretty amazing. And I left. I got in the car afterwards, and I was like, I don't even know if I have the energy to drive home. But I liked that feeling. And
was it a hot yoga class?
It was a hot yoga class, and it was like a flow class, too. So we were like, I probably spent half the time in child's pose.
It's really the best way to do yoga.
So I was like, great, I can do this. On the way to or from work, I ended up going to yoga maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And so I did that, for the rest of the winter, a couple of months into January. And then I decided I was going to run the Boston Marathon. And that was kind of the progression. There was no progression. It was just, I'm going to do this now.
All in. So you went from not being a runner as a soccer player, well, I guess you run in soccer, to what did your training look like? We'll get into what your training looked like now, but what did your training look like for that marathon? I know you mentioned you were, you found a program online, things like that. Yeah,
so I literally had done nothing but work too hard and party too hard and eat the wrong things for a long time out of college, and then I started doing yoga. And I was really attached to that. So the training program I found, I forget who put it together, but it was one designed to not be running focused. It was one that coincided with someone who did other cross training. And of course, I knew nothing about running or training for a race. So I think by cross training, they meant other things that would, strengthen your running cause, not necessarily 3 days a week of yoga. So I had 2 running days. I probably ran 4 miles and then 6 miles, and then I did a long run on Sunday. And, starting in February, I had 2.5 months. So it was basically that. I had 2 easy runs. I did yoga a couple times, and then I slogged through these long runs by myself in the middle of nowhere, and it was painful.
And you were in Boston at the time, right?
I was, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So one of the things, I know we talk a lot about training on our taco and Normatec nights.
Yes.
One of the things that I've recognized that you've kept consistent with is the yoga and the cross training and the swimming and the strength training. So how did those lessons you learned early on as sort of a newbie runner, how do you apply all of that? Is that why you still do it today?
Yeah, there are a couple reasons I do it. I guess on a most basic level, I feel much happier physically and really mentally when I just feel like I'm a good, complete athlete. And so, if I've gone through periods of time where I've just run and beaten my legs up on the roads, and it really takes its toll. But when I do other things like, swimming and cycling and yoga and go to the gym and, go to November Project and do those other pieces, I stay healthier and I'm happier. And as a result, maybe not all of the things I do are ideally focused towards making me a faster runner, but I think because I'm happier and healthier, it makes me a better runner. And so I can stay in the game and keep progressing.
Definitely. I think that's one of the consistent things that I keep hearing from athletes that I've been chatting with. You heard Ben Rosario's podcast where he said he doesn't even talk about time goals. It's all process. So how early on did you start understanding the importance of not just hitting splits all the time, but enjoying it and thriving and having fun while doing it?
Yeah, it took me a long time, to be honest, because while I was doing I was going to, after the Boston Marathon, I was surprised that as badly as that race sort of went for me, I was surprised that I, at least on the other end of it, was still healthy. And I was looking for my next challenge. And I had been introduced to November Project, which is free fitness here in Boston. They do a lot of different things that I just really enjoyed, and it felt good, and it made me stronger. And so I continued doing that and yoga just because I loved doing those things, and I hadn't really thought about it. But when I did target a next race, frankly, that fall, I did have a time target, and I did have a real training plan that did have some prescribed splits, and I got angry and frustrated every time I wasn't hitting them and wondering why and questioning how the training was going. So initially it was not, I hadn't connected the dots. I was just doing what I enjoyed doing and doing what I had to do and, making the best of it. But it really hasn't been until recently that I've sort of, loosened up a lot and said, I need to be happy and I need to remain healthy. And I think there are some different ways of thinking about my training and my racing that will allow me to do that. So I'm just going to focus on that. And it has had a lot to do with, I thought that podcast you did with Ben Rosario was really A+. And, that's really there are some common themes, I think, especially within the running community and at the top end of the, these elite training teams that have resonated well with me. And one of them is just, you gotta be happy and you gotta enjoy the process. There was a quote from one of the runners on Tin Man Elite that was just, philosophically while they're training, what he's thinking is there's nowhere else I'd rather be and there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. And so obviously you can't make that up. That has to be true and valid.
True,
but
yeah.
you got to put some things together that make you happy and not want to be doing anything else or be anywhere else. And if you can do that, you can sustain your training. And so that's really what I'm trying to do.
Cool. Let's talk about the process of going from you were doing 15 to 25 mile weeks for that first marathon, and now you're doing, you're peaking at 4 times that, 5 times that, 6 times that. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, it's been
5 years elapsed, but
it's been 5 years. Yeah. And I think about it from time to time, and it's really been a progression for me. And I think one of the small pieces that has kept me as engaged in the running piece and focused on trying to find my best and being able to work as hard as I do to pursue that, I think running a lot of times, training to get the most out of yourself is a thinking man's sport, in that, there's just so many variables that can make you feel good or feel poorly at any given point in time. And there are all sorts of different training philosophies, all of which really work really well if applied correctly. And so, I've always enjoyed, I'm a tinkering type of person. And so I would, start training, and I would take what I thought went well previously and what I know other people are doing better than me and add some things and see how that goes. And, some things work out and some things don't. And, sometimes I've had success adding mileage, and sometimes that's hurt me. And sometimes I've had success making my workouts harder and longer, and sometimes that's hurt me. And so it's just been a progression. And, I take a lot of notes. I try to read as much as I can. I ask as many people for help that I feel are knowledgeable, and try and take it from there.
Cool. One of the things I've respected about you over the years is you're always willing to delay a workout or take an extra day off or take an easy day, versus just hammering and I'm going to get this workout done on Tuesday, or I'm going to get this workout done on Wednesday because that's when it showed up on my plan. Have you always been that way, or has that been did you learn that lesson over and over and over again before it finally stuck?
Yeah, I mean, I really only had to learn it once. I mean, I tried to do, I always tried to do early on, I think, in my training, I always tried to do this marathon pace workout right after doing a really heavy workout involving my legs the day before. And I was always wondering why it wasn't going the way that I wanted it to.
Go figure.
I was like, I'm never going to achieve my goal because I can't hit this damn pace split. And then, I took a couple weeks off from that workout the day before, and those marathon pace runs started going exactly as I wanted them to. And it was like, what a dum-dum. Obviously, you can't do 2 hard days in a row and expect it to go well. So I just learned that lesson there. And then it progressed from, you can't always expect to feel good when you wake up and you want to work out. So you can try that workout, but it's miserable and you're probably not going to do well at it. And then it's going to screw up your recovery for the next couple of days. So, just be cool and take a day off or take an easy day and do it another time. And it's tough, for like you and I and a lot of our friends. We've got full-time jobs, and so sometimes it's really important to us that we do exactly what we said we were going to do in the time allotted in our week, because the rest of the week's accounted for, and so it's tough to move things around. But if you're really after performance, you really have to be able to make smart decisions every day to not only perform, but avoid the worst case, which we've also had a lot of friends do, which is avoid getting injured. That's been one of my major things is I'm just trying to stay in the game and stay consistent so that I can keep making progress. And I know injury is going to derail me, and so you do dumb things like train too hard too often, and it's going to catch up with you real quick.
We can take this one of many ways. There are a lot of things I'd like to follow up on here. So let's go with the balancing work and play, or work and training. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of athletes that have the luxury of coming home, kicking up their legs, and taking a nap after their workouts. And then there are a lot of us,
nice.
And there are a lot of us that, like I literally run commute, and I go straight from shower to breakfast to a meeting. And how do you, and I'm sure you do, you do that as well. How do you manage running 80 miles a week with a job and with social obligations and with, whatever else is out there?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. Some weeks and some months is more difficult than others. And, what I'm trying to do is, first of all, I'm fortunate in the career that I have that I can be very flexible with my calendar. And so, we joked about this the other day. Yeah, I get into the office at 8 o'clock, like everybody else, but I'm on mountain time. I'm on Flagstaff time. You got to live in the East Coast, so my 8 o'clock and your 8 o'clock is different. But, I can control my calendar of when I have appointments and when I need to see clients. And so on days where I need to sleep in a little bit more and work out a little longer, I'll make sure that I don't have a work obligation until, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning so that I can do that. But balance, it's not as balanced. There's actually it's imbalance, I think, successful imbalance in a way, because I think you have to prioritize a couple of things that are most important to you and that will leave you, sort of like I said before, doing what you want to do when you want to be doing it. And then you have to recognize that maybe there are other things that are important to you and that you would like to be doing that you just can't right now. And I'm sure if you talk to my mom, she would say, Seth, how's running going? Great. When are you going to run a little less and, go on a few more dates or something? Like, find a girlfriend, will you? I want a grandchild. And it's like, oh, geez, here we go. I love it. So, no, but like social activity, it's not just work versus training. It's the social things in your life or the other pursuits that people have. You just have to focus on the one or two that are most important and make you the happiest now, and then have other periods in your year or maybe in your life where you focus on the other things. And I'm trying the best to do that, but it can be frustrating.
Yeah, I think we're at a time right now where we don't have kids, and there are a lot less obligations that maybe some of our coworkers have or some of our training partners have, that now's the time to get after it. And the two of us can sit and talk about running while eating dinner and using Normatec, and that checks a box. That's a social obligation, and it's a it's a recovery.
Well, I also say that one of the things that I admire about you and some other friends is, it's not just that we're lucky to have some flexibility or have some free time. There are a lot of people that I think have more flexibility than they think and more free time than they recognize, but they're not as thoughtful about choosing what they want to do and then just going after it and doing it. It's actually difficult to just, okay, I want to train hard. that's easy to fill your calendar with. But most people won't actually take that step. And maybe it's not training. Maybe it's something in your professional life. Maybe it's something like volunteering or learning something new. It's like you also have to think about how you want to fill your time and then go and do that. Because whether you're running a lot of miles or your job is challenging, we're all tired and we all want to be lazy and we all want to mail it in sometimes. But I think that part of living your best life entails not just prioritizing what you want, but like going and making that happen and then making sure you space the time to do that. I think most people just lose that first step. And it's unfortunate because, we live in a big city. Everybody's, there's not as much road rage and angry drivers around because everyone's living a happy, simple life. Everyone's frustrated about things. Yeah. So go live your best life. And if you're not, that's kind of on you. It's not anybody else's fault.
I love that. I'm going to pick on the comment you made about living in mountain time. It's specifically Flagstaff. Yes. We've talked at length about training in Flagstaff or training camps or whatnot, and one of the things that we both thrive on is the community. So let's first start with who's your crew here in Boston? You don't have to name names, but the groups and stuff.
Well, my main squad is Heartbreakers Running Club, Heartbreak Hill Running Company. That's the that's the team I race with and train with, and a huge part of my personal social life. But people will also joke with me that I run with I train with all the groups in Boston, right? So I mentioned
he does.
I've mentioned November Project. I love that. I love that crew. They're a running group. I'll run with any running club, regardless of what their schedule is. And there are, you've asked me at different points in time, like, hey Seth, when do you run? And it's, we've got Drill Club on Wednesdays, we've got Cortado Club on Thursdays, we've got a group that runs on Fridays. Here's what we're doing for long runs. And so to me, the social aspect of anything is important. Running especially if you're training hard, because it gets difficult, especially in Boston and New England when the weather sucks. And if in fact you're marathon training, or for you're training for an ultra, it gets to be a grind, and so you can't do that on your own. And so I've always loved my time running with other people, and there's a social element of it. And it's more basic really for me. It's like if I meet you and I like you, I just in my head assume you're my new best friend, and I'm going to start, not only being nice to you, but I'm going to invite you to everything that I'm doing, and I want you to come. And I just think that we're really fortunate in Boston to have an incredible fitness community and running community, and I try to plug into that as much as possible because it makes my social life and my personal life even better. But it's really one of the main things that allows me to continue working as hard at this running thing as I am, because I've got great people around me that support me and lift me up and that are doing the same thing with me. So, it's like you're never alone doing it.
Definitely. And I feel like one of the reasons that people are always down to support you, or people are, cheerleaders on the side or pumped to watch you race, because you do so much to help and lift other people up. I've asked you to help me with workouts, I don't know, half dozen times. And every single time you've been like, yeah, sure, I'll meet you here at this time. And I just remember the funniest one was the one we did on the Harvard indoor track. We did a 2-mile time trial, and I was at 100% effort, and you were just chatting my ear off. And it was fucking hilarious because I had no capacity left to do anything but just churn the legs. And you were just like, yep, we're nailing the splits. Yep. Chatter, 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 chatter. Oh, did you see what's going on over there? Oh, I'm doing this later today. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And it was fucking awesome because you, like, it couldn't have been that easy, but we were running mid-5, so, like, it wasn't slow, but it wasn't like we weren't blazing fast.
Right.
And it was just like a fun day for you.
Yeah, it is fun. Well, it's always fun, on a personal level. One of the things that, I just enjoy helping people. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's running or, in my career, what I do in essence is I help people. And it's just always something that's been very motivating for me. And in fact, it's such a higher priority helping other people at times than doing things for myself. I just don't. It doesn't charge me up as much doing things for me. And I know one of the things that's helped me out in continuing to work hard and train as hard as I do is how my other friends, you included, have just help keep me in the game and help motivate me and help support me. And there have been plenty of workouts I could tell you about where I was huffing and puffing and didn't think I was going to get through another lap, let alone another rep or the rest of the workout. And the person that was helping pace me was just chit-chatting away. And I was like, well, this guy's taking time out of this day to help me out, or I still have to pace the person behind me, so I don't want to let them down. And it's just one of those things that, if somebody asks me for help, and I can accommodate that, I'm going to do that. And I think, it's part of just being a good person and helping the community and helping your friends out. And I like the good vibe that comes along with it.
Definitely. So one of the big goals you've had that you've been very public with is the BQ Elite, and getting to that start line in Hopkinton, not just sub 3, but pretty far under sub 3. Yeah. Let's talk about where did that come from? That didn't start out as a practical goal. I kind of got myself into trouble with that one. What when you decided on that? What was the fastest marathon you had run?
So my first marathon was Boston, and I think I ran something like 3:52 or 3:53 or something like that. And then, I finally met some running friends, and I met, the November Project friends that I have, and they were like, well, you can't let this marathon thing be your only attempt. Yeah. So, let's sign up for one this fall. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it, whatever. But, I didn't know what to think about as a goal. And somebody's like, well, you've got to qualify for Boston. That would be great. Okay, sure. You just tell me what to do. So, so that in that fall, it was my goal to qualify for Boston. And you had to run 3:05 at the time was the standard. And I was able to do that. So I think I ran 3:02. And along that period of training, I just sort of got more into the actual event of the Boston Marathon and the running part of it, whereas previously it was just this big deal that happened in Boston that I was, I thought was incredible, but didn't really get it as a runner. And so, I just started looking into the Boston Marathon more. And one of the really cool photos that I had found was the starting line from maybe it was 2014, maybe it was 2013. And it was that moment. There's a really cool moment at the start of a race, which I love if I'm spectating. I always try to get to the starting line and capture this moment, which is, you've got all of the athletes lined up at the starting line, and they're waiting, kind of anxiously for the gun to go off. And then it does, and they spring forward. And so that initial moment where they're springing forward with their first step, and some people are starting their watches and other people are just focused on the road ahead. I just love that moment. And I found that captured the start of the Boston Marathon. And it was, Meb and Ryan Hall and everybody else at that elite starting line. And I was just like, God, I love this photo. And I wonder what it'd be like to start a race, at the front, at the starting line. And, of course, I could have just gone to some little hometown race and started at the front and was like, oh, that's cool. But I said, I would love to start at the beginning of the Boston Marathon. I don't know what that means, but, that's kind of my goal. And so that's where it kind of took off. I kind of threw that out to a few friends, geez, I'd really love to start at the beginning of the Boston Marathon. And they're like, yeah, right, buddy. You can't do that. That's for elite athletes. I was like, yeah, so what I got to do? Tell me what I got to do and I'll do it. And so finally I was like, I got sick and tired of enough people like laughing at that. I was like, what are you laughing at? And so I emailed the elite coordinator of the BAA and was like, hi, I ran Boston last year. I don't remember what my time was, but I was wondering what you had to do to start at the front with the elite athletes. I didn't see it standard published on the website anywhere. And did
you get a reply?
I got a reply. I could actually bring it up for you. I'll see if I can bring it up. I actually maybe this is a little embarrassing. Of course I can bring it up because it's like one of only 2 start emails in my entire email box. So anyway, I got this email from Mike Perroni, who I don't think is the elite athlete coordinator anymore for the BAA, and he said the standard for elite entry for men is this, and the standard for elite entry for women is this. And I was
and
like,
you weren't on either of those.
December 8, 2014, elite entry to Boston Marathon. And let me know if you have any additional questions. I probably was like, yeah. How do I run
get
that
there?
fast? So,
and what was the?
It's essentially an invitational. So they reserve the right to invite or not invite anybody into the elite field. But the response is essentially low 220s. 221 is not something they advertise, but what was sort of given to me as a guideline. So like once a year I would check in and be like, hey, Mike, what's going on? Not there yet, but how many people in the elite field this year? So it's funny.
And who's the slowest?
Yeah. And what do I get? I'm not quite on my way. So that's funny. So I looked that up from time to time. And he gave me that and I posted on Facebook like, well, I'm just going to do this. And somebody, Micah Risk, our friend, was like, I love it. I'm going to do it too. Let's do it. We'll do it in like 2 years or something. I don't know. Obviously, I'm a slow learner because I'm still not there yet, but I'm still charging forward. I'll get there.
Nice.
Hopefully,
I love it. And you're self-coached, right?
I am. I don't know if that fully represents what goes into my training, but by and large, yeah.
You put together your own plan, but
yeah, I
often see your workouts, and they're similar to ones that I've done, or albeit at much different paces. Or but let's hear about the sort of the style. What are the workouts look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's my training has evolved really, and in part, due to research I do. If ever there's a new book coming out about running the marathon or training, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to take notes and I'm going to mark it up, and I'm going to, as I'm going through my current training, I'm going to write notes on what goes well and what doesn't, and then try to incorporate new things. And so, my personal style, what works well for me is I'm pretty good at doing higher mileage, and I really like longer, harder workouts. Unfortunately, I can't do both at the same time. That's where things usually start to blow up for me a little bit. But, I've got my training, my model training week pretty well dialed in, and I've got my build up to a marathon, maybe 8 to 12 hard weeks dialed in at this point. And so I really just try to substitute workouts that I find fun or interesting or a little bit different. And I'll get them from lots of places, people in my running club that I work out with, other coaches. I mean, there are probably a handful of coaches that I follow very closely, on social media, and I've bought their stuff, and I just really love what they're doing with their teams, and I follow their athletes, and I love the successes that they're having. And so I'm always trying to incorporate a couple new things into what they're doing into my, my training.
Cool. So I literally ran into you on my run this morning.
Yeah.
You were over at Harvard.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that the workout you did might be a little story for the podcast. I have no clue what that means, but I don't do any editing on here, so let it rip.
Oh, man. You might have to edit after some of my dumb stories. It was just, it was a foolish thing. I honestly, I can't explain how it happened. I think we've all probably had these workouts where it's a longer workout and maybe you're doing long intervals on the track, and maybe, you try to dull the pain and you dull the rest of your brain function, and you sort of lose track of what lap you're on. And so, that's easy, right? You just look at your splits and, you're either done with that rep or you're not. Sometimes I lose track of what I'm doing in a fartlek, a longer fartlek, where maybe I'm doing like 10 or 12 or 14 reps of like 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, or you get to the end of it and you're just like exhausted and you lose track of, am I at 11? Am I at 12? Am I at 13? Whatever, but usually what happens is you've convinced yourself you've done more than you've actually done, and you check afterwards and you're like, ooh, I was 1 or 2 short. Okay. So this morning I had the shortest workout. It was a hard one for me, and I've been kind of banged up lately, so it was kind of painful. I just had a couple sets of mile followed by 4x400. Couldn't be any simpler, right? So I do the mile, and then I just have to be able to count 4 400s. Couldn't be any simpler. But
on a 200-meter track.
On a 200-meter track, I was indoor today. And I usually like working out when and where I work out, because very frequently, a lot of the local pro teams are also working out, and I just really enjoy watching them work out. They inspire me a great deal, and it's just great watching professionals do what they do in any sport. So I must have been a combination of just distracted, maybe fanboying at the other, Is
this the New Balance women again?
Easy, geez. I mean, they were all represented. BAA Elite was there. Saucony was blowing up my spot. So I think it was a combination of just, watching what they were doing and blocking out how horrible I thought I was feeling during my reps. And so I left the workout being like, geez, and I was thinking of adding, another mile at the end of it, just at 10K pace, because that's sort of the distance my training's focused on now. But I got into that final set of 400s, and I'm like, I am drowning. I need to get off this track before I embarrass myself, and I need to get in front of some coffee and a breakfast sandwich quick, or I'm going to pass out. And so I do my cool down, and I get home and I'm checking my watch and I'm checking my splits, and I'm, putting everything into Strava. And I'm like, what is going on right now? There's an awful lot of splits here. And my 400s, I was sort of doing them at like mile to 3K pace. So, for anybody, that, relatively speaking, is a fast pace, and you can't do too many of those. So I kept thinking while I was going through the workout that I'm only on rep 1 or 2, and I still have like 2 or 3 more to go. And by the end of it, I ended up doing like 4x6 or 6x400. I ended up doing way too many 400s. And I'm like, no wonder I felt like I was dying a slow death at the end of this workout, because I did way too many reps at like mile pace. And I'm like, I don't know. For most people who maybe listen to your podcast and don't do regular speed work, they might be like, I have no idea what he's talking about. But you just don't. At the end of a workout, you're dying. I think it's very rare ever if a person does far too many reps than they were supposed to, especially not short, fast ones. So I was like, I still can't explain. I must have blacked out or something.
Yeah, I think I pulled up your Strava here. That's hilarious.
Yeah. But in hindsight, I got through that and I finished my sandwich, and initially I was feeling like garbage at like having this poor workout. And then I'm like, wait a minute.
You did an extra 20%.
In fact, I did far better than I thought I had, and I probably would have been better suited just adding another slower mile instead of some 400s. And I'm like, okay, now I feel good. And it's like, I then started laughing at, how narrow that line is between feeling like crap and then feeling great about something, and how you just got to,
I think that's why the process approach is so key, that like you can laugh at the fact that you blacked out and did an extra and did some extra work. But if you were hard on yourself, you would have been like, I fucked this up.
Right.
And I did too much work. And no, instead you can look at it as like, you can get through like this. Yeah. You can add that as a mental win.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the short distance racing. You've done some short stuff on the track where you self-admittedly have just gotten your ass handed to you.
Yeah.
You know, on a silver platter. Why do you do it?
On a crappy platter.
Yeah.
I think it's fun. You know, I think that I think racing is fun. I mean, one of the things that is so attractive to me about running is racing. Right, I'm not like, I don't love every mile of the 80 or 90 miles a week that I run, and workouts are hard, but I think the payoff is racing, and that feeling. There's two feelings, and I know you've referenced it recently in your workouts and in your podcast with Ben Rosario. You know how great it is in your 5K pursuits to just put your foot on the gas and go all in, and you get to mile 2 and early in mile 3 and you're like already feeling annihilated, but that's that moment at which you're like, I'm going to keep my foot on the gas because I'm going to feel amazing at the end, and you do.
Yeah.
And I love that. And while I'm far more suited for racing longer endurance distances like the marathon, I think it's great developmentally to race shorter distances, and I also you can present that moment where you're annihilated in the race and choose to either mail it in or quit, or keep your foot on the gas and suffer a little bit and get home. You can find that shorter, and you can feel great after the race having done that. And so I've got a buddy at Heartbreak, one of my closest friends who runs the 800, and that is a ridiculous distance, 800 meters to race. That is like, I think it's generally accepted that might be the hardest distance in running. And so he got me to run it last year, and it was hard, but it was a blast, and it's only over, in a couple of minutes. So I've made it an annual thing, and I tried it again this year, and it was
still
kind of a nightmare. Yeah, I really screwed it up. Somehow, not having any experience last year, it was probably no pressure, no experience, just go out there and run a couple laps around the track. It went great this year. I don't know if I thought that like magically I'd wake up and it would be easier and I would run a couple seconds faster, because that's easy without any training, and the opposite happened. I just got smoked. It was embarrassing. But it was great. I loved it. I'm going to do it again. I might not even wait a year. Maybe I'll try one outdoor this year.
Well, the cool thing about the short stuff is that you can have these massive flops, and it can be, as long as you get through it, it can be a mental win, and you can do it every weekend. Yeah. Whereas, like, you screw up a marathon, or you go out too fast in a marathon.
Yeah,
you got to respect that recovery process.
Yeah, I agree. It brings, if racing is the most fun aspect of running for me, like these shorter distances, absolutely, you can race them. I've got friends who race a couple times a weekend indoor, and can do that. 5K, you don't need the same recovery that the marathon requires, your body, when you go really as hard as you can. So it's just a lot of fun. And I just think for people, especially who are trying to maybe chase down some goals at a distance, if all you've ever focused on is that distance and training for that distance, it just mixes things up. Race any distance.
I saw a tweet from Jason Fitzgerald, who's the head coach. He's a running coach and a podcaster over at Strength Running, and what he said was sometimes he has his marathoners take a season or two off of marathoning and just race 5Ks and 10Ks.
Yeah, I think it's great. And, we mentioned your last podcast with Ben Rosario, and, I just love a lot of what is going on out there in Northern Arizona Elite. And I think if you follow a lot of his athletes, the last year, while they've, by and large, at least the ones that I'm most following, they run the marathon. They've run, Steph Bruce is
she raced yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. She raced yesterday. She did it. I think that was a 10K on the track.
Yeah.
She ran, I think, the first 5K indoor that she had ever run recently. And she's been running forever. And I just think, and I know that philosophically he also agrees. He may have even said it, that, just get out there and race and see what you're capable of and mix it up. And I just think it's a healthy thing to do for runners, especially if you find yourself getting stale. And it's just, have fun with it. Who cares? Like, it's also, there's an element of it too that is on some ways, it makes it a little easier because I don't have a history in the 800 or a mile or whatever, and I'm not necessarily training specifically for that distance or that event. It is easier to take the pressure off of and just like, maybe it goes great, maybe it goes like crap, but who cares? Just have fun and move on. And, as we all like to do here in Boston after all races that typically end with a little party and a few beers, have a few beers, dance a little bit, and move on.
Yeah. And from a functional standpoint, I think some of my best racing happened when I was serially racing. Is that a word? It's a word on this podcast. When I was doing 5K training, I raced 5 or 6 in an 8-week period. And from a time perspective, I took a minute off of my PR over that time. And from a fun standpoint, you get to that point where it's going to hurt. Yeah. And because you did it the last weekend, that you can keep the gas pedal down.
Right.
And that's where Ben and I were talking about, like, leaning into the pain. Like, that's where I feel most alive, when you can, I remember vividly from Super Sunday this year, coming up on that hill at the end before you make the turn.
Mile 4.
Well, in the 5K, it's 2-ish, just over 2. And that hill is brutal. Yeah, and that's where the legs start to get super heavy. And that's where you're just like, this is where I find out what I'm made of.
Yeah, but it's we can talk about it now in the comfort of our cushy penthouse office you've got here. Love it. But when you're in a race and you haven't felt that in a while, and you're sort of hit with that, oh shit, this hurts.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to keep your foot on the gas pedal and keep charging forward. And so, if you were to take part in any of the 5K series and you were to do that week after week or every other week, okay, in that second one, you're like, this is going to suck, but I'm ready for it and I know what it's like and I'm going to do something different. And then maybe in the third or the fourth one, you actually get good at it and you can hammer the whole way. You can do that. And if all, like me, I've been focused on the marathon forever. And so I perform a lot better at that distance than any other distance. And so, it's very challenging for me to find a new personal best at that distance. But because there are other distances I rarely race, if I get frustrated at my seemingly lack of progress, I can just hop to another distance and not only get the feeling that I want to get from racing, but also have some positive outcomes, which are, seeing progress and getting better at that distance and having fun. And I think that's important. You gotta have positive outcomes from racing or workouts in order to continue working as hard as you do, or, you got to avoid that burnout.
Definitely. I had a chat with my coach after that race, and I was super pumped with how the race went, but from an effort standpoint, but not necessarily from a time standpoint. And he was like, athletes that evaluate their self-worth or their status as an athlete based on races burn out. Yeah. And they, you can't put too much weight on race day. Race day is icing on the cake. Yeah. It's the celebration. Right. And I think it's a fascinating approach.
Yeah, and you and I, more so you now, are really a part of two kind of different running communities. We've got this, road racing community that everyone knows about, and then we've got this trail running community that everyone knows about. And I think mentally, athletes in either discipline go about their training and go about their racing very differently. And, I know if I'm on the roads, even having an easy day and that clock ticks off my split, I kind of want to know what it is. I'm not necessarily going to be disappointed or happy or change my run, but I just want to know what that split is. Yet, you put me out on the trails, up in the fells or on a trail race, I don't really care what the split is because it doesn't matter, and the trail running community never talks about what's their pace? 50K time, what their pace is, because the terrain and everything is so different that it's not comparable anymore. Right. And so I think that they've actually figured out how to be a happy runner for longer periods of time. And it's on some levels, it's as simple as taking away that stress of a certain pace or time, or the anxiety of having to compare or people seeing your results. And I think that, I wish it were simpler for people, training for a particular road race or a distance to shut that off. It's just not as easy to do. But if you can and make it about the process and other things, you're absolutely right. There's a lot more longevity.
Yeah, I love it. That was one of the reasons I switched over to trail running last year, because I was getting too focused on the splits, and there have been some points in my training where the splits have been great, and this laser focus on the splits when they're good can feel good in the moment, but what if they're not good? Like, you can't be tied to the, how is your easy run? How is your hard race? Things like that. Whereas I was doing, 2.5, 3, 4 hour trail runs, and I would have an average pace of 9 minutes and 13 minutes and 11-minute miles. And it was just like all over the board, and it just didn't matter what was on the watch at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I ran. So this fall, I ran my first cross country race ever. I think I ran Mayor's Cup in Franklin Park, and not having run in high school and college, I just never had while I've done a lot of trail running, I never had the opportunity really to run a cross country race. And I was really down at that point in time this fall after my fall marathon, which I actually had recorded my first DNF, and was feeling kind of miserable about that, and feeling miserable about how the whole fall and summer ended up going. And I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter what my energy level is or what my training is. I love racing, so I want to get back into racing and just doing it for fun. And so I hopped into the cross country race, and I just, obviously cross country was easier for me to then think of it as a trail race. And so I didn't care about the pace. I didn't care about the time. I didn't expect to perform well. I just wanted to go out and experience that and have fun. And, I went out at an effort level that I thought was hard but sustainable, and kept on that pace and ran with a little pack of people that I was with and a couple of my teammates. And then, got to the hill there, I think it's called Bear Cage or whatever. And I was like, you know what, I'm feeling good. And so, usually you don't charge up a hill during a race, you do the opposite. But I was like, screw it. It's like a 8K or something, or 5K. And like,
this is how far I'm going.
And I'm happy. And the birds are chirping. And somebody said, go Seth. Right. And so I did. And I just finished that race strong. And I don't even know what the time was. I certainly didn't place, very high in the pack, but I just had a blast. And I was like, okay, you can have a horrible experience in a horrible race and then come back and have a positive experience. And again, has nothing to do with the outcome of the time or whatever. You ran the way you wanted to, you were relaxed, and you had fun. And so, that was just another lesson learned that, that was a big, I think you had asked, earlier in our conversation, how you learn to make it more about the experience and the process and less about, the time or the split. And I think this fall was a really big, frankly, now that we're talking about it, a turning point where I went on, I came from this experience where I was feeling seemingly very down after my marathon. And then I followed it up with, a cross country race, and then a 5K race that wasn't a PR, but I felt good. I got to feel that burn again. And then I hopped in a 10K, which I rarely do. And that ended up being a PR for me in December or November. And then that sort of ended my running year at a really high note, when it could have very easily ended, in a running depression.
That's awesome. What would you tell 2014 or 2013 Seth, knowing what you know now, looking back on 5 whole years of wisdom?
Just have fun with it. I think that I kind of did it right in a lot of respects. I mean, I found all of my good friends at Heartbreak Hill Running Company via my yoga coach, interestingly. I trained for the marathon without any friends, and finally at the end, my yoga instructor was like, why didn't you tell me you were running? I introduced you to my boyfriend, runs Heartbreak Hill Running Company at the time. They're married now. So I started running with the folks there, and I started working out with the people at November Project. And every time somebody said that they were running, I said, can we run together? And, I've just since then constantly tried to fill my running or athletic life with other people and people that I enjoy. And I did that right. It was accidental at the time, but I did that right. And I think that it's helped me from a technical perspective learn better and fashion my training. But it's also really enriched my life in a lot of ways. It's kept me motivated, and the groups that I'm in, have helped me rise. And when I've had down times, after this fall, it was one of my closest friends said, I'm running a 5K up in Salem. Come do it with me. And I was like, I'm not running. I lost my shoes. I don't know. And I did it. And I was like, yes, that was, yeah, right. So, whether it's my young starting to run self, or it's my other friends, or it's other people getting into it, just, especially if you live in Boston, you've got no excuse. There's a billion groups of fitness fanatics, running, cycling, swimming, whatever. Go find them and spend time with them, not just on your runs, but socially afterwards, because, people who I've found who've committed to fitness in their lives lead happier, healthier lives, but also even more than that, my friends who are committed outside of college, outside of, they're not professional runners, to chasing down some sort of goal that inspires them, and they're looking to find what their absolute best is. People pursuing that in their lives, whether running or elsewhere, are just really good people to have in your lives. And so, I look at my life now versus 5 years ago, and it's so significantly different and so significantly better that, it's by and large the community that I've surrounded myself with.
That's awesome. Well, I could carry on with this conversation for hours, but thank you so much for tuning in and for joining today. Where can people find you on the lovely interwebs? I've kept Common Athlete everywhere. So on Strava, I'm Common Athlete, and on the Instagram, I am Common Athlete as well. So follow along. I'm half jackass, half interesting. I don't know. Maybe that's generous in one of those categories, but I'll give you a follow. We'll let the listeners decide which way that level sways. But awesome. Thank you so much, Seth. Yeah, thanks for having me. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.